has said some things. He says he doesn't think I'm too much of a smart person. And I'll tell you one thing. It doesn't take a smart person to know if you're being lied to. President Trump had issued some statements throughout this process saying and urging, insisting that this bill does not cut Medicaid. President Trump, you're either being lied to or you are lying to the American people.
Imagine a president so desperate for control that he turned law enforcement into his personal fear factory. That's what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez exposed live on TV. And Donald Trump? Let's just say his meltdown could have powered a meteorologist's career. What did AOC say that sent him spiraling? And why was this the moment his fear empire started to crack?
Bill represents, in the text of this bill, the largest and greatest loss of health care in American history. 17 million Americans will lose their health care on this bill. As one of the only people in this body who has lived off of tips, I want to tell you a little bit about the scam of that text, a little bit of the fine print there. The cap on that is $25,000.
Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. Picture this, a kingdom where fear wasn't just a tool, but the official currency. That's exactly what it felt like during Donald Trump's administration.
There are a lot of Democrats who are throwing cold water on the idea that the president deserves to be impeached over this and saying that you shouldn't be throwing around impeachment given it's such a grave, serious matter. What do you say to that?
I believe that a president bombing and bringing this country into direct conflict with another nation state without notifying, full notification of Congress, without congressional approval. I mean, of course, everyone can have their differences of opinion regarding that matter. A resolution has not been filed, and not filed in a privileged sense.
Fear ruled everything. Criticize him? You'd better watch your back, because it wasn't just Twitter tantrums you had to deal with. Oh no, Trump had real power at his fingertips, and he made sure everyone knew it. His leadership wasn't about democracy, it was about dominance. He governed less like a president and more like a late-night mob movie villain. Government agencies, they weren't there to protect or serve. They were like his own personal henchmen. Remember ICE? Sure, on paper they were supposed to handle immigration enforcement. But under Trump, they became something else, a weapon. If local leaders dared to speak out against him or his policies, they could find themselves on the receiving end of ICE raids, lawsuits, or arrests that felt more like political theater than justice. Take Newark, for example. The mayor of Newark publicly pushed back against Trump's immigration policies, insisting on protecting undocumented workers in his city. Not long after, the mayor was arrested. Was it on solid legal ground? That's debatable at best. But it wasn't about actual guilt or innocence, was it? It was all about sending a very loud and very clear message. Oppose Trump, and there will be consequences. But here's the funny thing about fear. It doesn't age well. At first, it works. People stay quiet, fall in line, or at least pretend to. But over time, cracks start to show. You can only bully people so much before they stop being scared and start getting mad. Trump built himself up as a strongman, the guy who was always in control, whose enemies were always crushed. But for every mayor he arrested or every critic he tried to silence, there were 10 more people watching, taking notes and, little by little, standing up. Enter Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. From the moment she burst onto the political scene, she wasn't interested in playing nice or keeping quiet. Imagine being up against someone who not only refuses to be intimidated by you, but who actively calls you out every chance they get in ways that are smart, sharp, and even funny. That was AOC. Trump thrived on making people afraid. AOC, on the other hand, she thrived on exposing the fear factory for what it was, an illusion. Take when she mocked Trump's ICE raids during one of her now famous public speeches. Instead of cowering or trying to negotiate, she stood there, calmly pointing out the hypocrisy of targeting vulnerable families while ignoring corporations breaking labor laws or billionaires dodging taxes. With logic and facts on her side, she wasn't just resisting Trump, she was embarrassing him. It's one thing to call someone out. It's another to do it in a way that makes them look ridiculous. This kind of boldness started to unravel Trump's carefully constructed persona. Sure, he could still bluster and shout, call her names on social media, and rile up his base, but here's what he couldn't do: silence her. In fact, every over-the-top response from him only gave her more attention and allowed her to shine a brighter light on the cracks forming in his once brutal fear campaign. It was like watching a magician get caught with the cards up his sleeve. Suddenly, the magic wasn't so magical anymore. There's actually research that explains this phenomenon. Fear-based politics is a powerful tool until it isn't. Studies show that when a leader uses intimidation tactics too often, they eventually lose effectiveness, especially when someone confronts them without fear. It's like popping a balloon. It only takes one person daring enough to stand up for others to notice they can do the same. AOC wasn't just brave, she was an example, proof that the strongman wasn't so strong after all. Trump's image as the ultimate tough guy started looking less like a fortress and more like a sandcastle at high tide. And once enough people saw what AOC saw, that a bully only has power if you let them, it was game over for that particular narrative. Fear wasn't working anymore because people weren't buying it. But the loudest moment of that shift was still to come. Sure, AOC had made her stance clear in tweets and interviews, in speeches and at protests, but there was one moment, a live TV showdown, when the cracks in Trump's armor weren't just visible, they were impossible to ignore. It was the moment that would send him into one of his most spectacular public meltdowns yet. When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stepped onto the stage during that live TV broadcast, it wasn't just another debate. It was a moment straight out of an old-school David versus Goliath showdown. Only David had a microphone and an arsenal of piercing questions, while Goliath, otherwise known as Donald Trump, had, well, a tendency to implode when faced with actual opposition. The setup couldn't have been better for AOC. Trump was already on edge from months of political blows, his administration's immigration policies drawing fire from all directions. And here she was, armed with facts, calm composure, and zero interest in backing down. It started with her signature pointed questions about ICE. She didn't just hit the typical talking points, she went straight for the jugular. Why were they separating children from their parents? Why were families detained without cause and treated like criminals? And most importantly, why were taxpayer dollars funding what many were now calling a dictatorship? Trump, sitting smugly as if he could wave her off with a snide remark, quickly realized this wasn't the kind of confrontation he was used to. These weren't questions he could brush aside with lofty slogans or vague platitudes. She was pressing him, knowing full well he didn't have the answers, or worse, knew the answers and wouldn't dare say them out loud. Viewers at home could see it in real time. Trump started shifting in his seat, his lips pursed in that classic, trying not to blow up but also boiling inside expression he wears when caught off guard. AOC wasn't raising her voice or throwing insults. She didn't need to. Her questions alone were enough to unravel him. You could almost hear the gears in his mind grinding to come up with a response, but nothing landed. His usual tricks weren't working. She kept going, calm, relentless, and absolutely in control. "Explain how this is making Americans safer," she said, her voice steady but sharp. Trump stammered, launched into a half-baked explanation about law and order, muttered something vaguely patriotic, and wrapped it all up by calling her naive. That might have worked on someone else, but AOC didn't flinch. Instead, she hit him with a concise takedown that left the room in stunned silence. She pointed out that separating families and funding mass deportation was less about safety and more about creating a climate of fear. "You're not protecting anyone," she said. "You're just making Americans afraid of their own government." This was the moment Trump cracked. If fear was the foundation of his politics, AOC was standing on it with a giant spotlight. exposing every crack and flaw. His response came fast, furious, and completely unhinged. He went full grumpy Trump, launching into personal attacks, calling her names and even accusing her of being America's enemy. You know, because nothing screams strong leadership like resorting to schoolyard insults on live television. The visuals alone were enough to tell the story. AOC, perfectly composed, her hands calmly resting on the table, giving him an almost pitying look. Trump, sweating, hands waving around like he was trying to land a plane, his voice inching higher and higher as if yelling would magically make her points disappear. If you needed a snapshot to sum up the entire Trump-AOC dynamic, this was it. A poised and focused challenger dismantling a visibly agitated man who was quickly losing control of the room. For the audience at home, the fallout was instant. Social media blew up, praising AOC for not just standing her ground, but making it clear that she wasn't intimidated. Not by Trump, not by his title, and certainly not by his temper tantrums. The narrative wasn't just, "Look how AOC handled him." It was, "Oh, so this guy isn't as untouchable as he pretends to be." That's one of the worst things that can happen to someone like Trump, being exposed not just as wrong, but as weak. Research even shows why moments like this matter. Studies on authoritarianism explain that the power of fear-based leadership is directly tied to people's willingness to go along with it. The second someone shows it's possible to say no, that power starts to crumble. AOC did exactly that, and it resonated far beyond that night. She wasn't just speaking for the reporters or politicians in the room, she was giving permission to millions of Americans to stand up and say, "We're not scared anymore." Trump's meltdown became the punchline of the night. On social media, comparisons ranged from a kettle boiling over to a volcano losing it over the tiniest puff of smoke. The image of a man so determined to look in charge, unraveling over a young congresswoman's calm, collected questioning, was unforgettable. And while he fumed, she showed the world that even the loudest bullies can lose their voice when someone refuses to play their game. This wasn't just a takedown, it was a reminder that courage is contagious. AOC's courage wasn't just about taking on Trump, it was a blueprint for dismantling fear-based politics. Her calm, sharp defiance showed that the strongman image collapses when someone refuses to flinch. Fear only works when people buy into it, but she tore up the script and handed Trump a pile of useless bluster. The moment proved that power is its weakest when truth gets loud. For any dictator, the worst thing is not violence, but the truth spoken loud, clear, and without fear. And that's exactly what AOC did. She turned truth into a weapon, leaving Trump scrambling for cover.